Hey, Mike, do you have any update on those guys, Trey Darius and Tylan?
Well, we'll know a lot more tomorrow, just like always. They do all their exams, and I think they're going to be okay. Just in kind of seeing them yesterday, but I hate to play doctor when it comes to that, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is going to come from Scott Wright from the Oklahoman. Go ahead, Scott.
Mike, when you talk about the offensive struggles in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter, did the film reveal anything to you that you maybe didn't see on Saturday?
No, the film revealed what we knew going in is that TCU has a good defense. They're good in the box and the running game. They cover really well. You can watch all their games. They don't have a lot of people running open. They're really skilled at the corner position. Particularly number one is a really, really good cover guy. And so we knew going into the game that it'd be a difficult matchup in certain areas, but we had good game plans. We had chances. You have to make contested throws and catches when you play TCU in order to beat them.
And then looking ahead to Baylor, they're coming off a pretty solid defensive performance. You see some challenges that they're going to pose for you this week?
Well, people are going to get an idea of who Baylor is based on their record. But if you go back and look at their games and their scores, Baylor's been in pretty much every game that they've played. They've been right there. They've had a few things happen to them and in the end and not been able to win those games. But they've been right there and they're competing. And, obviously they played well Saturday night. So this is like every game for us with where we're at now. As we're starting to get a little bit better up front with some guys. And then as we start to continue defensively and, try to make up for a few guys not being in there, every game will be challenging for us. So we have to have great practices and really be committed in order to give ourselves the best chance to have success.
As far as Baylor on the offensive side, do you see at least the structure of what Larry wants his offense to be over there?
Well, they had a couple backs that were out, so they threw the ball pretty much every snap, I think 56 times against Oklahoma. I don't know if maybe that's the direction he wants to go or if they felt that they needed to do that with their backs. The quarterback's a savvy player. He gets the ball out. He's a tough runner. If you don't watch your lanes when you're rushing him, he'll pull the ball down, take off and run. He's really good at that. So, they've done some different things based on kind of, I guess, where they were at maybe with COVID and injuries and different things like that. I'm not sure.
Is Larry a guy you've stayed in touch with over the years?
Well, I don't stay in touch with anybody. I don't talk to anybody. So my family and that about wraps it up. I have a lot of coaching friends, but I don't waste time on the phone texting people and calling people and all that. But Larry and I have a great relationship. We go all the way back to Baylor. In the 90s. We were down there together in 96, I think. And we got fired. And then we all scattered across the country, and then we reunited here. He was working for me, and then he went on. But we have a really good relationship, and his family, his wife, are really close to my family. But I don't talk to anybody.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to try and go back to Ryan Breeden from the Ocala. Ryan, I think it was my fault that we weren't able to get you on. We're going to try to make that right now. So go ahead, Ryan.
Can you hear me?
You're good.
All righty, awesome. All right, Coach. So you mentioned in your opening statement a bit about the offensive struggles when Tylan went out. What do you think it is about when he's not in the game that makes the offense struggle to get going?
Well, I wouldn't say we struggled to get going. We were still somewhat effective, but you take a player that's a potential early round NFL draft pick and take him out. The defense doesn't have to be as aware of where he's at. So if you had the wide view of our game and if you went back and studied it, you'll see that they played a corner underneath him and a safety over the top of him. Well, that's one less player to defend the run. And if he's not in, then they feel like that they're equal, in my opinion, just from looking at it. That gives them one more player to defend the run.
And then in the past, you guys have always, it seems like, always had a star receiver on campus playing for you. And it seems like when that receiver usually gets near the end of his career with you, you guys usually have a guy underneath him that you know is going to be the next one. Do you have someone like that right now that you feel like you think is going to be able to take over that role when Tylan leaves?
Well, I've always been a little bit tentative to say that. Tylan played a year here behind James Washington, and nobody knew who he was. James Washington played a little bit as a freshman, and he was behind some guys. And Justin Blackman redshirted, and he was on the scout team for 1 year. So that's a really good question. But I always hate to throw a guy out there and put them in that category, because you're talking about a big time elite category. I don't want to put that much pressure on those guys.
Mm-hmm. I got you. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Robert Allen from Triple Play Sports. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to kind of go down the same lane that Ryan did, a little differently. I know you can't comment on recruiting, but we're just a little over a week away from the December signing date. In fact, you picked up a safety commitment on Friday while you were in Fort Worth. If this year's taught us anything, the frontline players on your roster, on your two deep, have been really good. It's developing that second line. How do you see this recruiting class and maybe some of the younger players in your program as you go forward, developing the second line, that next guy up that can come in and maybe it's not as big a drop-off or is not as big a concern?
You talking about the offensive line?
Offensive line's one area. Secondary, losing Trey and Rodarius, that's another area.
Right. So if you exclude the offensive line, we've had a little bit late in the year here, we've had a lot of reps by what would be our twos with Trey and Peel and Rodarius and, some guys being banged up a little bit. And as a coach, I fully expect that second wave to be ready to go in and compete where we can execute our defense. Now, I don't think any of us should say that you're going to take a guy like Rodarius, which should be a relatively early round pick, and another guy go in and it's going to be the exact same. Okay? Anybody that says that probably is not worth listening to when they're talking. Now, in the offensive line, it's considerably different because the guys that are playing for us right now is the third wave. Okay, we have 8 guys that have not been available that were available to us in June. And once we started doing some of our OTA stuff, as of this last game, we had 8 guys that were not available. So we're into the third wave of the offensive line. That's a little different. And so we, meaning the coaching staff, have to be really patient as we develop those guys. And they came from just, hanging out at practice, drinking some Gatorade, looking forward to what lunch was going to be, to all of a sudden you're a starter. And so that really is a difficult situation for them. Springfield was a guy that we celebrated him being a walk-on freshman, gave him a scholarship, and it was an awesome deal. And then 2 weeks later, he's starting. So you have 2 different waves that we're dealing with right now. 61, 70, and 74 as freshmen. For what they're doing right now, based on where they're at in their career, they're playing their ass off. It's awesome. Now, they get beat. They get pushed back. But they're not backing down from anybody. And they're getting a little better every game. They just don't have enough meat on that chicken bone right now.
When you look at what you've got lined up for a week from Wednesday and you see what's on your roster depth-wise, do you like – we've had you several times where you've got, hey, guys, I really like the future. As you look at this, are you pretty happy with where your future is shaping up with the depth and with this class you're about to pull in?
So I'm as excited now as I ever have been about what we have. Here's the good news about, you talked about, we talked about 13 and 25 and 6 and 4 and some of those guys playing on defense. Okay. That's kind of the second wave. So that's normal. We'll get past all that. The offensive line, the third wave, the good news about this is this. all those 3 freshmen, they're getting a lot of live reps. So when they go into January and February off-season conditioning for 8 weeks with Coach Glass, they're going to know I better get a lot stronger because I don't want to get my ass thrown around like I did last year. So until you get in the fire, sometimes you don't get it. Well, they've been in a fight now, so they know what that street fight's like. And they're getting tons of reps that you just can't get when you're a backup. So that's an exciting time, and we're getting some guys back. 67 and 77 are kind of limping around practice now, and they might get a little bit of work this week and maybe a little bit more next week. So that's exciting for us. With all the young guys that are getting some work, we should be pretty close to we'll have 2 centers, 3 guards, and 3 tackles in spring ball that we feel really comfortable with based on experience. Strength levels will increase and their reps. So I get excited about that.
Thanks.
Our next question comes from Barry Trammell from the Oklahoman. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, Mike, you haven't had too much of this, but a trend in recent years in college football is guys opting out of bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've seen it. Guys are opting out of the regular season when things go a little bit south. What's causing that? Is that a concern? Is that just a byproduct of administrators who fire coaches in midseason, or coaches who leave before their season's over? What's the root of all this stuff?
Well, there's 2 things. There's 2 sides of it. First thing is I don't think it has anything to do with coaches. Coaches have been fired mid-season or late season. That trend's been going on about 8 or 10 years from now. And then coaches have been leaving and taking other jobs for longer than that. So there's 2 ways that we can all look at this. See, if you look back, even let's talk about COVID. You had some opt-out people in June-ish, July-ish, a little bit in August, and it was COVID opt-out, concern about the virus. All good. Well, mid-season, early to mid-season, you start seeing players all across the country that were opting out. Well, that's post-COVID. That's not COVID. Like, if you have a player that stops playing after the 4th or 5th game, and he had COVID back in August or September, then he's not a COVID opt-out guy. Basically, he's just a guy that stopped playing. Okay? So there's 2 different ways that that's taken place. Years ago, we had the running back from LSU that didn't play in the bowl, and I forgot his name. Fournette? Yeah, Fournette.
Yeah, Leonard Fournette.
Wasn't he the first one?
Well, I think McCaffrey might have been with Stanford.
Hey, those 2.
Okay.
One of those 2, right? But they were after that. I came into the staff meeting and I said, guys, I'm really concerned about this because, and I don't know McCaffrey, I don't know Fournette, I don't know their agents, I don't know anything about them, but I'm guessing that they had agents that got in touch with them and said, hey, look, there's no reason for you to play in the bowl game. Your value in the NFL market is going to be the same as it is right now. Why take a chance? You need to step out. That's just my guess. Okay. Well, since then we've had, I don't know, somebody could do the research, a lot of players that have stopped doing it. Well, this year now, based on COVID and then post-COVID, we've got lots of players that are just stopping in the middle to the latter part of the season and not playing anymore. And my concern with that is how the television market is going to feel about their investment in bowl games with the potential of 2 teams playing in a bowl game, and the best or most highly decorated 3 or 4 players on each team don't play in the bowl. That's my concern. I'm not concerned about how it works. I'm just concerned about, is there going to be a market, or is the television people just going to say, I'll just show a couple more NBA games on Saturday. I'm not going to show this bowl game with their 5 or 6 best players and the other team's 5 or 6 best players not playing in the game.
Our next question comes from Garen Emick from the Tulsa World. Go ahead, Garen.
Hey, Mike, I was going to go a different route, but to follow up on Barry's question, if a kid is hurt, it may not even be season ending necessarily, but there's obviously something physically wrong with him. And you've got a case there with Tevin and maybe Chuba as well. I don't know what Chuba's status is. And he comes to you and says, look, coach, I need to get someplace and get healthy to prepare for the draft. Is that a more reasonable excuse to drop off at that point and sort of secure his future?
You know, we can all sit here and talk circles around all this stuff, but I tried to explain it the best way when I was answering Barry's question. Let's take COVID out of it, okay? Because hopefully we're going to not be talking about COVID next year. But you're still going to have players that stop playing during the season, in my opinion. This is all money driven based on information that's coming from somebody. Could be an agent, could be a financial resource, could be parents, could be grandparents. Somebody, in my opinion, is getting to players and saying, look, why do you need to play the last 4 games? This is what your value is. You just need to stop, okay? And that could be a season-ending injury, or it could be a player that just says, I'm not playing anymore. There's no in between.
Okay.
You follow me?
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying.
So like Tylan Wallace last year,
Mm-hmm.
he had a season-ending injury. Tylan Wallace this year had a little leg issue before he played Kansas State. So he wasn't out for the year, but he was out for that game. Then he came back and played. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's 2 different sides of it. It's a part of college football. It's not going away. Everybody just better learn to deal with it. Fans better get used to it. Coaches better get used to it. Teammates better get used to it. It's a preference, a personal preference of that individual.
Mm-hmm. So I'll go then to what I was going to ask. You got some questions. You've been getting some questions about Big 12 aspirations and things come up a little short this year for reasons that are obvious. We've been over those. What I want to know is, as other programs reach that level, in the last 4 years, you've got 4 different schools showing up to play Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship. Does it become a little bit more difficult knowing you haven't gotten to that game, seeing the variety of schools who have, if that makes sense?
What schools are you talking about?
Well, this year, Iowa State, Baylor played for the championship last year, Texas before that, and then TCU. I'm just talking about since they reinstituted the game. You've done well over those 4 years. You just haven't played in that game. Does it make it more difficult to come to grips with the fact you haven't gotten there when you see these other schools who have, is what I'm asking.
Well, our goal every year is to get to that game and win that game. Clearly, that's what our goal is every year. Now, if you want to go back and look at, there's 2 ways to look at it. So if you have a good run and get there, and then your next 2 years you have a losing record, is that productive? I'm asking you, if you were the coach.
The year you have a losing record?
Well, if you get to that game and then the next 2 seasons you have a losing record.
What are you asking me? Which is productive, the losing record season or the
I'm asking you consistency.
Say again?
What would you rather have if you were the coach?
Well, I'd rather get.
Would you rather have one good year and get there, and then the next 2 years have a losing record?
I would rather have consistency in the program, which is what you're getting at, I assume.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but you'd also rather get to that game, would you not? At the same time.
I've said that from day one.
Right.
Our goal is to win a Big 12 championship, and here's why. History will tell you if you win a Big 12 championship, you have an outside shot of getting in the playoffs. Now, Barry brought up a question last week, is that, and I don't know because I've never done this, if you go back for the last 10 or 11 years and they would have had a championship, we'd have been in it, 6, 7 times? Maybe. I don't know. I don't ever count that up because basically it's irrelevant to me.
No, you've competed for Big 12 championships. I'm just talking about the last 4 years since they've reinstated that game.
Yeah. Well, the point being is this, is if you get to the Big 12 championship, it's a good thing. If you don't win it, it's the same as the other 8 teams. You did finish second.
Yeah.
It's like recruiting. You don't get there's no second place medals at like the Olympics. There's no silver medal. You either get a gold or you get last.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
You bet. Everybody's got No Shave November going. You got No Shave November going.
I'm going no shave December for what it's worth.
I got you.
All right, we're getting a little short on time, but we're going to try and get 2 more questions in. One will be from Chris Becker, and the other will be from Jenny Carlson, and that'll be it. So, Chris, go ahead. You've got the floor.
Coach, you mentioned it earlier about the offensive line. They've only given up 1 sack the last 2 games. What have you seen from their growth since the OU game?
They're doing better. Were you on here earlier when I was talking about them?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're getting better. But myself, Coach Dickey, Spencer Sanders has been awesome. Illingworth's been awesome with them. The running backs have been awesome. You're going to have to be patient with them. Okay? So my job is to see what kind of effort and what kind of commitment are they making to this program, because it's unfair that they're playing right now. So I am seeing them grow a little bit each week. When they first went in there, you guys can go back and look like 4 games ago, whoever we played. I mean, it was a sackathon, right? You probably watched every one of our games, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. We got sacked quite a bit, right? Well, they're doing better. They're getting a little better. And so I'm excited about what they're bringing to the table, but I'm also realistic that we can't just all of a sudden make those guys that are just going to compete at a high level right now. That's a long answer because I'm trying to give them some credit because I am excited about their development. Yes.
So somebody we haven't talked about much this year is Ry Schneider. He's one of the consistent pieces at the center position. What did you see from him this year, and how he's been able to hold down his spot, around all these injuries?
He's awesome. Ry's a guy that needs to donate his body to science next year. He's had about every nagging injury you can have, and he just competes. In fact, he graded the highest out of the offensive line in this last game. He was at 82%, which is a really good grade for a lineman. He struggles through practices and stuff, but he loves to play football. He loves to compete. He loves his teammates. He loves Oklahoma State. And there's a lot to be said about him and what he's been able to do. See, he played last year in like maybe 2 games when Johnny was hurt, because Johnny was a good Big 12 center. And so Ry would come in and he was fresh. And he did just fine. But when you play an extended period of time in there in the trenches, and your body, I love Ry, but his body's not really built for that. It can wear and tear on you. And he's just competed, and in fact had his best game last Saturday. So he's been awesome for us.
Thanks, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and our final question is going to come from Jenny Carlson. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hey, Mike. As you think about this offense, this is going to be, if the trend holds, it's going to be an offense that has some of the lowest averages since you've been around, basically, points, yards. I understand injuries. I understand all that. I understand you've got a great defense. But even with all of that, you've had injuries in the past. You had that year that, Garmin plays quarterback for you for a good chunk of the year, and it wasn't, the numbers weren't where they are this year. How do you get back to a more creative, even productive, a higher production level with your offense? How do you get back to that?
Well, we've never had the experience we're having in offensive line ever, period. And that's just a serious issue. And what happened is, you got to realize those guys playing, they weren't even working with the offense. They were on scout team. So they're in a real training program. So we've had a few issues, but we've not ever had what we've gone through even the year that we struggled up front, we've not had this situation. So there's not anything wrong with Casey Dunn. There's not anything wrong with our schemes. We just need a little bit of maturity, and we need a little bit of growth, and those guys will be just fine. That's my job. My job is to be very critical of our game plans after every game in all 3 phases, and be very critical of myself and our coaches. And then on Sunday, I'm real detailed with them about everything I thought. We don't always agree. Okay. Sometimes those meetings don't go as planned and coaches don't like it, but that's my job. I don't have any issues with, I think what you're asking is whether I like what Casey Dunn's doing or I like what our philosophy is. Is that what you're asking me?
Not specifically. I'm just more curious about, I mean, this is the same offense. He's been around, as long as anybody, obviously. So I'm just wondering, like, and you mentioned the offensive line. My follow-up to that would be, what would you guys want to see out of the offensive line before, and I know we're getting to the end of the season, so maybe the runway is not long enough, but what has to happen? What are those markers before you feel comfortable to say, all right, we were only able to do this much of the playbook with the offensive line? Maybe it's not. I mean, I don't, if that's kind of been, what is that?
The playbook part's not been that bad because the guys that are up are pretty sharp. It's just what can we ask them to do athletically has been a bigger issue. So now I kind of got some clarification. The Texas Tech game is what we want to do. But we felt like that our matchup up front was pretty good, even though we had some youth and not maybe as strong as we want to be. We thought we had a pretty good matchup. So that allowed us to expand what we did offensively a little bit. If you, what you guys do, you know enough about football to know, you can go back and watch our TCU game. We had to be very protective of what we did rushing the ball because you can see we don't do a lot of different things based on there's times that we felt like that we couldn't hold up, and then certainly pass protection wise. Like, I'll give you a good example. Like, there's a team in this league right now that's playing pretty good, and over 80% of the time they throw a pass, they'll protect the backside tackle. They'll give him some chip help because they know that guy can cause problems for them and cause them major setbacks. So it's all the same. But the Texas Tech game, we felt like we had a decent matchup, even with the youth and immaturity we had on the offensive line.
You guys used some heavier sets too in that Tech game with multiple tight ends out there looking to be more blockers than pass catchers. Is that, I mean, and it looked like it worked out pretty well, but can that carry over, or does it really have to be those good matchups you guys feel like you got?
As bad as I want to tell you it's not true, it's all about matchups. So when we played with those guys on the edge like that, what that allows us to do is to not let that defensive end get really wide and rush up the field because there's a tight end there. So he has a little protection so that tackle can set and get a better feel on that guy. That defense allowed for that to happen with us. TCU's concepts are different. We didn't have that luxury. Well, we couldn't figure it out, that's for sure.